Hey guys, this is FightWrite, a writer's resource for writing fight scenes, action, and violence. I'm Carla, and today we are going over 10 things writers should not believe about fighting. First and foremost, about every single thing I'm going over today you can find in my book, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes with Writer's Digest / Penguin Random House. What is not in my book, you can probably find on my blog, FightWrite, FightWrite.net. If you want to know about me and my fight background, go to the blog. Okay, 10 things. These 10 things are not in any particular order. It's just things that I have heard from writers. I am often asked when I'm interviewed, what do you see people doing wrong in fight scenes, or give us an example of something wrong in a fight scene. And first of all, I am never going to call out any other writer and say that their work is wrong. I don't think that's nice. We need to be family and support each other. But I am going to tell you some things that writers have told me again or mentioned to me again and again, and they're just not so. I actually worked with a writer this week. She was finishing up her edits, and her publisher, I do some work for a publishing company, and they sent her my way. And she believed some of these things too. Okay, here we go. Number one, women fight differently than men. We're talking about trained fighters. We're not talking about on the street. Trained fighters, women do not fight differently than men. Not once in my fight training has the coach divided the room and said, here's the boys' stuff, here's the girls' stuff. When you are trying to figure out a fighting style for your character, don't look at gender. Look at their size and look at their natural ability. Number two, you do not feel pain while you fight. This is a tough one because it really is different for everybody. When you are under the effects of adrenaline, the pain response is greatly diminished. However, how much it's diminished depends on the injury. It depends on the person. I have interviewed people who were stabbed. One person had no idea he was being stabbed. Other people absolutely felt the pain of it and understood they were being stabbed. So whatever level of pain you give your character when they sustain injury in a fight is probably going to be okay. You just need to know that across the board, it is going to be much more painful once that adrenaline ebbs. Now, is it possible for you to get punched in the face and not feel that punch? Yes and no. It doesn't register so much as pain of a punch, but you do absolutely register the force and the kickback of the head and all that kind of stuff. So if you give if your character gets their arm cut off and they feel no pain, hey, that's absolutely possible. If they feel excruciating pain, hey, it's absolutely possible. Been a long time since I've had an arm cut off, so I can't speak from personal experience on that one. Number three, your character will be afraid as they fight. Not true. The great thing about fear, and Gavin DeBecker mentions this in his book, The Gift of Fear, which everybody on the earth needs to read, is if you are afraid, whatever you're afraid of hasn't happened yet. When you are in the throes of a fight, and whether it's a sanctioned fight that you've trained for, or whether it's a fight out on the street, once the crap hits the fan, you do not feel fear. You feel a drive to survive or a drive to win. Yes, if I have a competition, I'm going to be nervous from the time I get up to the time the ref says go. But as soon as the ref says go, nothing else exists. You do not feel fear. On my blog, go to the index. I believe it's called Being Attacked. I interviewed a lady who was attacked by half a dozen people. And she said before the fight, when she felt them coming, realized what was about to happen, yes, she had an explosion of fear. But once they were on her and beating her, she said there was zero fear. There was just a primal drive to survive. So as you're writing your fight scene, if it's first person, be sure that you do not say during the fight that the character is fighting and they are afraid. They may fight in a panicked, frenzied kind of way, but they're not feeling fear. Number four, you can punch someone in the nose and drive their nose bone into their brain and kill them. I cannot tell you how many people believe this. If you have ever seen a skull in your life, you may recall that there was no huge proboscis coming out of the center of the face. That's because there's only about a teeny tiny little bit of bone that belongs to the nose. The rest of it is cartilage. It just doesn't work that way. Can you completely smash a nose up? Absolutely. I know of people who have broken their nose and it went completely flat because it just destroyed the cartilage. But again, there's no bone to be driven back into the brain. I don't care who you talk to or who says, oh, I know somebody's brother's cousin's best friend that did. No, they didn't. Lie. Not possible. Number 5, technique always beats strength. Oh, how I wish this were so. From standing, all things being equal, okay? If I am up against an opponent who is my exact height and my exact speed, and I have technique and they don't, I'm going to come out ahead because technique is going to allow me to use my mass and acceleration to create greater force. Strength, when it comes to punching, and I have a video on this, to punch hard, you don't punch hard. Punching hard isn't a strength thing. It's about a mass and a speed thing. So if that person is stronger than me because they're bigger than me, it's not their strength that's going to get me. It's their mass behind the force of their punch that's going to get me. On the ground, strength does matter. Anybody who tells you technique always beats strength either hasn't been fighting long enough or is a big person, because I can tell you on the jiu-jitsu mat that they can muscle out of even really, really good technique. I can have a perfectly executed, and this has happened before, perfectly executed armbar, and the guy has reached down, grabbed his hand, pulled it up, and stood up with me. That's a strength thing. It's also a size thing, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So again, does technique always beat strength? No. The only thing you can count on in fighting is that basically anything can happen. Number 6, you can lift somebody by their neck and the two of you can have a conversation. I have read this in books, and I assure you it's only possible if you're Darth Vader or if you have some magic in the background. But even then, there are some problems, and we'll talk about the science of it. Biologically, your spine just really isn't made to hold your body weight like that. Does it mean when you pick somebody up that their neck is going to break and they're going to die immediately? No, it doesn't. It means don't try this at home. The spine just is not made for that. As far as, and if you're picking them up by the throat, they are not going to be able to have a conversation with you. That's something else I saw in a book where one person picked up the other one and they were squeezing their throat and they were having a conversation back and forth. And honestly, put a little pressure on your own throat and you're going to see you really can't have a conversation. But let's just say that instead of grabbing somebody by the neck, I have just grabbed them by the foot and held them up. There's still a science issue there, and it has to do with physics. If you look at the physics on how they construct cranes, there's actual formulas to construct a crane to know how much it can lift. And you're going to run into issues with, torque, center of mass, but never mind the fact that you have to be strong enough to hold something out in front of you like that. That alone is not easy. But again, from a physics standpoint, I did the calculations, and for someone to pick up a person who is 165 pounds and hold them out in front of them, unless the person picking them up is about 400 pounds, they're going to topple forward. Now, does that mean a big 400-pound sumo wrestler can pick up somebody by the neck that weighs 165 pounds? Sure, that's absolutely possible. The question is, how far away from their center of mass can they do it? They may be able to do it. The closer you are to the center of mass, the less likely you are to topple forward. So if they pick them up and they keep them close to their body, hey, that may be possible. Is the person who's being picked up going to be able to talk? No, not if he's holding them by the throat. They're just not. If you've got magic in your work, that's a whole other thing. If you're picking up somebody by the foot and the person weighs that much more than the person they're picking up, it's a possibility, but boy, they're going to have to weigh a heap more. I'd say a good 2.5, 3 times, 4 times even maybe their weight. Number 7, most fights go to the ground. I have a whole chapter on this in my book, and there is a statistic that people throw out a lot, that 90% of fights that go to the ground. That statistic is actually based on information taken in by the LA Police Department and them going after criminals. And so I'm not really sure how accurate that is in comparison to street fights. However, there was another study done, let me look at my notes, by Dr. Akari Bakil. And again, this is all in my book. He examined CCTV footage of street fights. 42% of those fights that he looked at, both people went to the ground. 40%, both people went to the ground. And 72%, one person went to the ground. Of that one person that went to the ground, 60% of the time, it was either by a takedown or throw. 30% of the time they went down because of a punch. 10% of the time it was because they were pushed. 60%, and I think this is really important, 60% of the time the one who stayed on their feet the longest won. What we don't know here, what Dr. Bakil considered a fight. We don't know, and because it's CCTV footage, we don't know how many of the people were under the influence of drugs. You know, if one person is drunk, obviously they're going to be easier to take down than the person who's not. So again, there's a lot of moving parts here. Is it feasible that your characters will get in a fight and go to the ground? Absolutely, it's feasible. Absolutely. More feasible that one person go to the ground than both people go to the ground. So again, you can refer to my book showing the statistics on that, but 90% of fights going to the ground, that's taken from information with police, and I'm not sure if we can really relate that to street fights. Which brings me to another issue. I think people think fights on the street go on for a really long time. And they don't. I looked at FightFast.com. I forget the president's name of FightFast.com. I'm so sorry. But he did a study and it said that most fights on the street are under 10 seconds. The people that I have talked to that are scrappy people and they've been in a ton of street fights, all of them, 99.9%, said they all lasted under a minute. So do not think that when you have a street fight or just any fight that's outside of sanctioned rules in your book, that it's going to go on for minutes and minutes and minutes. It just doesn't. They're over fairly quickly. Number 9, a writer said this to me, and oh, that I wish it were so. They said that in a fight, smaller is better. Only if you're a mosquito. Physics is on the side of the smaller person when it comes to agility and explosive speed. And that makes sense because it's easier to twist and turn something that has less mass because there's less friction and less gravitational pull on it. So as far as being able to juke and jive and outrun somebody, yeah, the smaller person does have an advantage. Usain Bolt, one of the fastest man we have on record right now in the Olympics, if you will notice from his 100-yard dashes, for about the first 30 to 40 yards, he tends to be dead last. And that's not because he's not faster than his, opponents, obviously. It's because he is on average, I think 4 or 5 inches taller than the average Olympic sprinter. And so he doesn't have the same amount of explosion. It takes more energy for him to go from standing still to full speed than it does someone who's shorter than he is. Everything else, physics is on the side of the larger person. I wish it weren't the case because I'm the size of a strapping 6th grade boy. The person with more mass has the potential to create more force, and the person with more mass tends to be stronger for the simple fact, even if that mass is all fat. Okay, let's say that obviously someone who has more muscle mass is going to be stronger because they have greater potential for the simple fact they have more muscle. But let's say that someone has greater mass simply because it's just fat. They are still going to be stronger because on a daily basis, they carry more weight. That is why power lifters a lot of the times tend to be kind of thick, chunky guys. And it's because on a day-to-day basis, that extra weight makes their bones stronger and it makes their muscles stronger. So is it better to be smaller in a fight? In my head it is, but that's about it. Number 10, and this will make you feel good, writers. I have talked to writers about their character and they say, well, their character is just natural. They're just a natural fighter. I do believe, and it's the same thing with writing. Writing and fighting have a ton in common. We are born with the natural ability to be a writer. But we're not born with the skill. We're not even born with the capacity to create words on a page or to type. Those are things that we have to learn. It's a skill we have to acquire. And it's the same thing with fighting. Yes, somebody may be born scrappy. They may have great coordination, great hand-eye coordination. They may have, a very willing spirit. And a fearless energy, but that doesn't mean they know how to punch technically correct. It doesn't mean they know what to do when somebody, puts them in a head and arm choke on the ground. So your character may be born with the ability, but they're going to have to work for the skill, just like writing. And that's why you're watching this video right now, to increase your skill as a writer and get more tools in your toolbox. And that is it, guys. Those are 10 lies writers should not believe about fighting. If you have any questions for me, feel free to put it in the comments here. Feel free to get me on Twitter at Carla Hoke, or you can reach me through my website at FightWrite. You would think I would know it by now. FightWrite, FightWrite.net. And until the next video, get blood on your pages.